Hey y'all, welcome back to another tutorial, and today I'm going to show you how to create this technique for your next skirt. So first things first, we're going to start off with our base, and we're going to make sure it's completely sewn except for at the center back seam. Now for this tutorial, we're going to be using Crinoline. This is Crinoline that I got from Rosa fabrics, and we're also going to be using woven interfacing, and we're going to apply the interfacing to our fabric first. Now, when you're applying this interfacing, you want to make sure that your fabric is laid out nice and flat, and you want to make sure that you aren't creating any holes or spaces or bubbles or just gaps in your interfacing while you are fusing it to your fabric. Otherwise, it's going to make your drape look super cheap and just not well put together. Now, when I did mine, I made sure I did small pieces at a time, working my way from right to left and then downwards on my fabric. Once you're done applying the interfacing, you should have something like this. You can already see my fabric looks a little thicker. Now what we're going to do is we're going to lay out our fabric. We're going to get our crinoline, and we're going to underline the crinoline to our fabric. But first, I'm going to pin the crinoline to the fabric around all of the edges. Now, when you get ready to pin your fabric to the crinoline, you want to do it like this. As you can see, I used a lot of pins. I put pins maybe every 4 inches or so. That's how you want to do it. And once you start sewing, sew your fabrics together at 1/4 inch. So now we can finally begin the draping process. Now, I like to start off by folding over a corner of my fabric. That's going to be the top edge of my drape. And so I want to say I started about midway through my fabric, or maybe even around 60 to 70% through my fabric. Now, in this tutorial, I'm showing you how to do this by creating 2 halves of a drape. But when I originally created this design, it was actually one piece, like one drape that went around the entire skirt. That's how I actually recommend doing it to make things a lot easier when it comes to finishing. But what you want to do is you want to go ahead and pin this fabric around the skirt. Now, not fitting tightly, but as you can see, it's pinned very loosely around the entire skirt. This is helping us create the actual body for the drape, but we'll add the actual details of the drape as we go throughout the draping process. So as you can see, I am just taking this fabric around the entire skirt, and as you can see, I'm at the end of my fabric now as well. We will end up finishing this at the end of the video. So for now, we'll just pin this, but we'll end up finishing this open end of our drape later on. But this is what you should have so far. I know it doesn't look like much, but as you can see, I'm creating the body and the volume that I want for the drape, and we're going to add the details as we go. So now at this point, I was trying to see if I wanted this to continue around to the back, but then I realized I actually wanted to cut it. And so I wanted to cut it because I want there to be a focal point or a focus point above the leg, so it looks kind of like there's a slit, so I ended up realizing that I wanted to cut this as I started to play around with the detailing of it. And so once I did that, I ended up cutting a piece, I want to say slightly to the side of our center front seam. Well, not center front, but our side front seam, or center bust seam, you could say. But this is me starting to create the shape, like I said, and then I realized, okay, I want to slit here, and so that's when I decided to go ahead and just cut this. Also, if you'd like to mimic what I'm doing for the detailing of the drape, all I'm doing right now is essentially creating folds in my drape. I'm trying to see if there are any pieces of this fabric, of this drape, that wants to fold or curve naturally, and I'm starting to create that shape. I want this drape to look like movement, to look like motion, to look like it's moving like water, and so because we've added our interfacing and our crinoline, we've definitely removed some of the movement out of the fabric, some of that flow out of the fabric, but there's still some there, so I want to try and capture that within our design. And so that is what I'm doing. I'm looking at the fabric and seeing in what ways does it feel most natural, most organic for this fabric to flow and to move. So around this point, I realized that I wanted to go ahead and cut my fabric. And so what I'm doing is actually starting more so from the side. So you can even say the side seam. I started to cut open our fabric. Now, I mentioned earlier that the original design that I made was just one piece of fabric, meaning the original idea that I had, it was actually just one piece of fabric. In this case, we are going to have two. We have one starting from the side seam and wrapping around to the center back seam, and then we have that, I guess, side back section. Now, the original design that I used, it didn't do that. So if you would like to make yours one piece, you can. Now, with each cut that we're making in our fabric, we want to make sure that our crinoline is still attached to the fabric. So I went ahead and I did a base stitch, basically going through the entire length of the fabric that I just cut. Now I will be able to go through this draping process more effortlessly and fluently. So now you can see that I'm trying to create more shape, more curve within our fabric, trying to get a little bit more body there. And I also have a little bit more range, a little more freedom with things that I could do with the fabric now that that piece has been cut. So now the next few minutes of this video is basically a sped up version of me going through this draping process. There isn't too much to say, so I'm gonna put on some music for y'all in a little bit just so you can kind of watch and follow. Even if you want, you can slow this video down. That way you can follow, I guess, a little bit more accurately with what I'm doing. But essentially, essentially, all we are doing is molding our fabric. So seeing where the fabric looks best. I'm playing around with the movement of it, how it lays. As you can see, I'm trying to create curves and shapes in different areas. And if I feel like it looks good, it doesn't look crunchy, which it kind of does right here. I'm going to end up changing it later. But if I feel like it ends up looking good, then I'll put a pin in place. When I'm pinning this, I'm pinning it to the base and essentially the mannequin as well. For the lower parts of the drape that go past the mannequin, I'm pinning those pieces to the actual fabric. But this is how I am essentially creating this drape. This process took me, I want to say, a few hours. It took me about a few hours. But once I actually figured this first part of my drape, I start cutting my fabric because my movement started to get a little bit limited with what I could do with the fabric, since I wanted to carry the fabric more towards the back. And so as I'm cutting, I'm doing more shaping. As I'm cutting, I'm making sure that the look is what I want. And I'm also making sure when I cut that I cut enough to fold the fabric under, meaning I cut enough to be able to hem it, I cut enough to be able to finish it properly, or cut it enough to make sure I don't make any mistakes. So now we are carrying our drape off to the side. The front is basically done. And I'm also doing this technique, or not even a technique, but I'm also pinching and pinning our fabric as well to adjust the length. So basically gathering up, pinching up inches and inches of fabric to create shorter length on the side, but also add more to the shape. And so I'm playing around with that as well. So that's something that you can feel free to try. Now, as we get to the back, I am having this curve down slightly. I don't want the back to go up too high. Also, when you're doing drapings like this, you want to think about how is this going to feel when the client sits down in it. Since we have crinoline inside of our drape, inside of our fabric, you don't necessarily have to worry about the shape not holding. I haven't really had that issue before. So if the client is sitting down on this, when they stand up, the shape should all still be the same. It should still have the same volume. But yeah, this is what it looks like as I start to, create that shape at the back. Now we're speeding it up a little bit more. This part took me a little minute, just because I was not sure how I wanted the back of this to go at all. And so even there are a few parts, as you can see, that I cut open the drape just to give me a little bit more range, giving me a little bit more mobility of what I could do with the design. And so as I try and drape this skirt, drape this design, I'm cutting where I feel necessary, and then also hand sewing any cuts that I make as well.
Hey y'all, I know you're enjoying this
tutorial and we're about to get right back into the video, but I wanted to take a moment to personally invite you to my Couture draping course. I designed this course for the designers who already have a great foundation. You know how to cut, you know how to sew, you know how to create, but you are ready to take your designs to the next level and actually start creating some couture garments. You want to be able to create the things with volume and structure and all these different things. Now, in this course, we have different types of projects available. We have some that will show you how to drape a garment from start to finish, and then we also have some that are going to just focus on the techniques only. That way you can really get a good mix of everything you need. Normally, enrollment is $500, but if you're watching this video, you will be able to get this course for a discount. So at checkout, enter the code ESC tutorial and you'll be able to get this course for $350. And yes, we have payment plans available too. So if you're serious about becoming a better designer, you want to grow your craft, you want to see your skills improve, and you want to get results like my students who've been able to create garments like this just from being in my program for a matter of weeks, then go ahead, click the link in the description, and I can't wait to see what you create. Now, let's get back to the video. Alright, so now we're at the part, or almost at the part, where I begin to hand sew the drape down. But before I do that, I just want to make sure that I have the placement of everything in a place that I really feel confident with. So I wanted to play around with the shaping at the front a little bit more too, cut off any extra or excess fabric, and I wanted to create a little bit more like curve at the front as well above this leg. And so you can see that's what I'm doing. So just how I created some slits and some cuts at the back, I'm doing that at the front too, and I feel like it made a really huge difference as well. But once that's done, now we can go ahead and start hand sewing. So when it comes to hand sewing, I always say wherever there is a pin, then you need to hand sew. Now for this, we want to hand sew through these creases. We want to hand sew, like I said, anywhere there's a pin, you want to hand sew a little tack there. But we want this entire drape to hold a shape. We do not want it to move at all. And so that is what I'm doing throughout this entire thing. As you can see, anywhere there is a pin, I'm hand sewing it and making sure that it is the drape is secure and that it also won't move. I'm making sure that it is sewn to the dress well. I'm making sure that my stitches aren't too loose. And so once you finish hand sewing the entire first side of the dress, now you can go ahead and move on to draping the other side. So I know I want this to all flow together, so I am starting the drape from inside of one of our little curved pieces, I guess you could say. And then I'm going to do the same thing that we did at the beginning of this tutorial. So basically creating the body of the drape first, then we go in and add the detail later. So now that I've created the body, now I can start adding more detail, adding more shape. I am really big on making sure your drape is consistent. So if there's a certain effect or style of draping that I did on one side, I want to continue that on to the other side, just so everything could be very fluid, very consistent. And so that is what I am doing for this. I am trying to create that same type of curvature, that same type of flow throughout the other side of my drape, while also making sure that the way that it'll finish at the end will look nice. And so once I finished draping, this is what we had. Like I said, I did the same thing that I did to the other side. This is how we ended up finishing the back. And then I ended up going in and hand sewing everything together. So I first started off with the underneath side, I guess you could say, of our drape, like the side that's not really seen, the lower part of it. And so I'm starting off by sewing anything down to the base that needs to be sewn down. And then once that is sewn in place, then I want to go ahead and start sewing the hem of our drape. So basically folding under the edges and hand sewing the dress, or hand sewing the drape to itself. And so I don't want any raw edges to be seen. I like a nice clean finish. And so we're going to just take this fabric from the bottom of our drape and sew it underneath itself. So it hasn't gotten to that part yet, but as you can see, this is me still sewing the front together, making sure that's secure. And then once that's done, it'll be moving along to the part of me hand sewing the hem of the garment. This part is honestly just, it really is just hand sewing. It's the most tedious part of draping. So if you want to watch the whole thing, you can. If not, then you can kind of like speed up through this part. This is the part that I mentioned now where I talked about I'm focused on the hem. I had to get on the floor for this part to really be able to do it effectively. But I did the hem in a way to where it looks nice and neat. You see no raw edges. And all you see is basically the fabric. It looks like a nice, pretty finish. Now, I will say as I was doing this, I ended up pulling my fabric a little too much. So it did shift the look of my drape a little bit. But it still turned out nice. So this is what we have as our finished product. And then once I added the boning, lining, and everything else, this was the end result. And my client loved it. So that concludes our tutorial. Thank you for watching. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. And I'll see y'all next time.